Welcome back. I've been wanting to get this transport hub in place as it's really been preventing me from building in this plot of land. I really need the hub in place before I can get cracking on with this area, so today is the day. What I've got in mind is a multi-level development, being able to handle multiple transport options, so trains, buses, taxis, and I want to future-proof it for trams too. That said, I want to create a destination in its own right, somewhere where the Sims can hang out, or maybe get something to eat, or grab a coffee. So I'm looking to introduce a retail or a kind of mixed use development to the build today as well. Very quickly, before we get into the build, I asked for some suggestions for a name for the fishing village that we built last week, and I've gone with La Pesca, suggested by Pylon John. It's Spanish for fishing. The town that we based it on isn't a million miles away from the Mexican border, and there's a town in Mexico of the same name just a little bit further down the coast. It's a nice suggestion, that one, so that one's in. I've gone ahead and put the main roads in place. I forgot to hit record at the start, so yep, that happened, but you didn't miss much. It's just a case of putting in a few parallel roads on the flat section and a couple of key walls to manage the change in the elevation. A major consideration for the build for me is to keep everything as pedestrian friendly as possible. I want to get that walking action on the go, so I'm going to link every change in elevation to a walkway network, pedestrian walkway network. Now from the top road you can access every bus and every taxi stop, and then the access is expanded all the way down to the train station that's already in place. So there's a bit of trial and error required to get these down onto that lowest level. Really what I should be doing here is just taking a note of the lengths and the angles and then just repeating it on the other side. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Now, as I cheerfully picked the positions for the bus stops, little did I realise there might be a little bit more involved getting these things in place and operational. For the start, I was planning on having this all one way, but of course, buses only have doors on one side of the vehicle, so that was never going to work. You can only have bus stops on one side of the one-way road. For the bus stops themselves, there are a few assets you can use. I landed on a bit of a mix. Here I'm going to use a couple of carports. For the walls of the bus stop, the pergola walls work quite nicely, so I'll apply them on the sides and at the back. That's looking pretty good already. A couple of stadium benches, slightly overlapping, will give us a nice row of seating. Now, to finish things off, some medium wall advertising boards at the side and the back should do the trick. Let's get this first one in place with Move It. And I think for each one, I'd like to have it sitting on its own individual surface and give the impression that it's got its own concrete base to sit on, you know, that's been put in specifically for it. I think that looks good. I think the design and the scale of it looks decent. I think it's a realistic fit. I've gone ahead and made a few more, so we'll get all of these in place with Move It as well. If you decide to make your own, don't forget to lock the prop elevation specifically for the signs. They will drop eventually and you'll need to put them manually in place. It'll keep happening. It's a real pain. So this little icon is what you're looking for to lock it in. Make sure you do that, alright? Now at this point, now that we have them all individually built and we've got them detailed up and we've got all the little signs on there, I'm just going to use Move It with the marquee mode. We can select multiple nodes, multiple assets and objects together, and we'll just slot them in place and where we want them to be. So we'll just rinse and repeat, copy the process on each one, and we'll just make sure that we get in a nice position, nice and straight, and ready to go on to the next bit. I noticed I had the carport assets facing the wrong way, so let's move it to the rescue again, and we'll get all of these things flipped around. Okay, let's see where we are. I think I'm pretty happy with the walkways. I like the spacing, doesn't look too cramped. Yeah, we're going to run with that. Happy days. I definitely want to get taxi option in here, and I'm not going to do anything too wild. I'm just going to fire a good few of them down here in fact, and that'll be pretty much it. At the front of the development, I'd like some wide pedestrian walking areas. Could give us some nice detailing opportunities later, so the humongous walking road will do. Then it's a case of finding some low-rise commercial assets and we'll fill the gaps. I definitely don't want one with parking on here, so let's find one that looks the part. Now we're going to head back up to the top of the development and I'm going to get the main building blocks for the shopping precinct put in place. I had a little practice of getting this done on a slope heading down towards the train station and it was an absolute nightmare, so much easier to do this on flat ground. So here what I'm going to do is just draw out pillars using the fence tools. This is going to give me a big uniform roof, which is nice. Once we have it in place, it will give us the basis for a big brutalist bus station building. There's obviously quite a bit to do here, but just to see how it looks, I'm going to add a few bigger assets at the end of the roof, and hopefully it will give me a bit of direction in terms of what else needs to go here and what else is going to look appropriate. Now the reason I'm redoing it here is that I need the very top road to be a little bit closer to the main station itself. It was going to be too large of an area, the platform or the open area if you like underneath the roof was just going to be too large and there was going to be too much exposed out to the elements as opposed to being under the roof. So yeah, definitely compacting it a little bit, bringing it in, it was a worthwhile adjustment. So now I'm just going to bookend it really with these big assets, really just to see how it fits in and how it works with the pillars more than anything else. Before moving on with some more of the big stuff, I wanted to get some detailing in. I think when you're building something for the first time, it can help to mix and match some of the bigger stuff with the smaller detailing. Again, it just helps me get my head around what's going to work and what's not going to work so good. I reckon once you've built something a couple of times, you can usually stick to a more organised build order, so to speak. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, I guess, but usually I found if you can get all the big stuff done, and then you work your way down, you can usually get things done a little bit quicker. I like those yellow stripes on that surface. It's giving us a bit of a warning area, I guess, you know, for the Sims. You'll note that I'm not applying that surface under the walkway where it's possible. If you surface under the walkway, the surface will actually appear on the walkway itself, and I definitely don't want that. So under those walkways, we're going to box them off with some fencing. Then we can fill the gaps with some appropriate greenery, some vegetation, bushes, trees and whatnot. Those little bushes do a nice job of hiding a little bit of untidiness around the bottom of the walkways. Then a little mix of oaks and then a brighter tree, which should work quite well for adding some contrast and colour to those pedestrian paths. A great addition to the mods this week is the Grates and Covers decal packs by Crypto Gamer Skylines. We're going to be using a load of these here, and we're going to be using them to plant a few smaller manicured looking trees. The birch here is a good choice. You can see the base of the tree, so it doesn't hide the decal. It's a really nice effect. Such a simple idea, but it does make a big impact on the streetscape. And what a difference a few trees and a couple of bushes can make in your build, isn't it? It's looking sweet. Lovely. Let's crack on. Having a quick peek under the roof, you can see there's a lot of space to work with here. The plan is to get some buildings underneath, but we'll leave a few spaces and a few gaps, for recreation or hangout areas. So I'm going to build out the big bits of the precinct now. You can see I swapped the original end building. I've gone for the high density EU commercial. The EU stuff looks a lot modern. It just looks much better, doesn't it? The NA ones all look like they're NY ones. It's all New York stuff, isn't it? So I think the EU ones are a lot more flexible in terms of what you can do with them. I like having the larger assets at the end here. Then it's just a case of finding some lower roofed assets and slotting them in, fitting them under the roof. I don't want random assets sticking out the concrete, but it does have its place at the end, with the bigger buildings, doesn't it? And it does kind of give a natural end point to the big brutalist roof. So let's get the rest of these in the place now. I'm going to finish up with a bit of surface work near the platforms, and with that in place I'm going to use some planters of my own. So rather than using decals here, I'm just going to go into dev mode, which will allow us to use roundabouts and we can plop them anywhere. So we'll bypass results in dev mode like we did before. We had anarchy and we should be good to go. This works well on all roundabouts, but due to the space constraints I'm just going to use little ones here. I'm going to continue the theme from earlier on, and we're going to use the small butches down here as well. Those poor sods at the taxi ranks are waiting forever for a cab, so I'm going to swing back to our temporary taxi depot and we'll add a bit more capacity for them. The time to tidy up on the roads. Let's hook up the other side. Let's prevent some parking with the road tools. These key walls need tidied up a little bit as well. With the bus stop placements, I had a real frustration trying to get these things in. At one point I thought I might have to abandon the project entirely. Kept getting a failed pathfinding error, and I'm guessing it was something to do with maybe the distance between the stops. Maybe there was something weird going on with the networks and anarchy perhaps. Found a point where it worked. I moved the bus stop, sorted out the surfaces, took quite a bit of time, tried to hook the route up and it failed again, so that was fun. In the end, I just had to keep playing about with it and the placement and just go with whatever worked, whatever it would allow me to do. So not quite where I wanted the specific placements for the stops, but I'm going to run with it, it's functional. I'll probably come back off camera, adjust the bus stop location again, but I had enough of that for one session, so definitely one for another day I reckon. After converting the upper road to pedestrian, I want to dip down and detail the precinct. I want to add a number of kiosks, some seating areas, and I'm just going to detail it with a little bit of a mix of commercial props and some benches and all that kind of stuff. At the back of the seating area, I'm going to use the large signs and we're going to create something of a mural here at the back. Don't believe you can use decals on the key walls yet, so yeah, it's a nice colourful effect at the back. I think it's pretty good. Next up is getting some greenery in here, a little mix of lined bushes and some tree brush action should help bind the different elements of the build together. I'm happy with that. It's not too over the top, but it does look a little bit more interesting now, and it looks like it's all coming together. So a few things I want to do here. I want to add a parallel road at the top, and it should let us add some tree lining in between the two networks, the pedestrian one and the traffic road. I'll need to fix some fencing I broke earlier as well. And now the time to get that final bit of road hooked up. I want a big collector here, so I'll be able to send these buses easily, you know, in a couple of different directions. But I also want to be able to add some larger buildings up here, and I don't necessarily want them sharing the same smaller roads as the buses. Another little job I want to do is fencing off the rail down here. It's more a reminder for myself that this area needs tidied up and it needs a little bit more detailing. When I complete the area in the next week or two, I'm planning on doing some surface work down here, but for now, it's just a fencing to gun. While I'm at it, I'm going to key wall the inside highway so I can get some safety fencing or highway barriers in place as well. Let's set up our routes. Route 1 will be the outside connection, so only one stop, straight to the edge of the map and out and off the highway. We'll bring it back and we'll complete the loop. That's all there is for Route 1. Route 2 will be the new neighbourhood we put in a week or two ago. I'm going to space out the stops and have stops on each side of the road. And I want some pretty good coverage in this neighbourhood. It's not had any transport options or transit options before. And again, we'll just complete the loop on that one. Route 3 will go out to our shipping yard industrial estate. That industry area needs some love. It took a bit of a pounding when we switched from Thunderstore to PDX mods. It's lost a lot of its surfaces, it's lost a lot of its plot buildings too, and in addition to that I had to span a bit of industry in there to make a bit of cash when the city was struggling for money, and a lot of props have disappeared as well. So that whole area is really in need of some love, and we'll definitely revisit that as well. Route 4 is going to take us out to our starting lake area. Again, we'll just create a big old loop here and we'll bring it back down to our station. Route 5, we are going to cover the resort area of the city. All the tourists can come in, off the train, straight onto the bus, or they can just use one of the pedestrian walkways, whatever they want, but they have options now. Route 6, the final route. This will give us a direct run out to our Rotunda town and our elementary school. I absolutely flat refuse to have these massive school assets everywhere in the city. I know my Sims won't like it, but tough. They just look so out of place everywhere, don't they? So instead, I'm going to make sure that they have easy public transport options to get to the education hub in the city. This route will provide access to the country club medical clinic as well. So let's take that for a little run. Let's see how it all looks. With this big transit upgrade, I feel a lot more comfortable getting in some larger scale expansion in the city. So for the next few builds, I'm going to pick a spot, I'm going to add a neighbourhood or two, and doing it this way means that I can get a bit of urban sprawl in without you guys getting bored looking at it, because it gets a little bit repetitive, doesn't it, using the lower density stuff. But I suppose staggering it in will also mean that we've got less chance of death waves, you know, in the city later down the line. I picked this spot to fill, and we'll just have a simple square shaped road plan. We'll add some cul-de-sacs. We'll need a bit of forest brush here, and then as usual we'll use the oaks, and we'll be good to go. Back at the precinct, I want to add a little bit more interest here, and then we'll move on. I'd like to repeat the tree and the decal combo found elsewhere on the build. And these little cobbled areas are needing a bit more interest as well. So let's barrier it in. We'll add some seating. A few bins here I reckon are needed to finish off the prop work in this part of the build. I'll add some dirt decals to the build. I want to go easy on these. It's not a big dirty industrial build. So I just want a little bit here and there, and we'll break up the textures a little bit. I reckon is the way forward on this one. At this point, I'd probably usually wrap up the video, but I wanted to see the hub in context of its surrounding built environment. I'd like to get a handful of larger buildings up here on the top end. I'm not going to go and detail these up. This will form the start of the next episode, so the detailing can wait till then. But I do want to get a clear idea of what's going to go up here. But all that good stuff will need to wait until the episode next time. So make sure you're subscribed, and we'll see how that pans out. You're going to see me starting to create something of a modern city commercial hub. Not downtown, remember, we're still in the suburbs here. I'm going to be looking forward for some nice assets to fuse, and I'm really looking to form some big building footprints here. So let's crack on, and we'll get the first of these in place. Then we can have a proper review and see what everything looks like when it's all connected. So I'm going to let this run for a quick time lapse. It'll just be a minute or so. But I do want to take the opportunity, as always, to thank my Patreon supporters and my YouTube members as well. Thank you very much, guys. Cheers. Now with the bigger buildings in place up at the top, that should give you a little taste of what's coming up on next week's episode. I'm going to do my best to get that up before the end of the week, so keep an eye out for that. It will include some substantial development and something very different to what's came before in Cape Lomond, so I'm looking forward to getting that one out. Now that this hub is in place, I feel a bit more comfortable adding some more density or higher density and pushing up the population in the city. The hub still has expansion opportunities. There's space on the platforms for several more bus routes, assuming there's no pathfinding issues of course, and we've got a dedicated lane and potentially a route at the very top of the station above reserved for trams when they're introduced to the city. Now the best thing about these builds of course is watching the Sims go about their business and shifting from one stop to the next and scurrying over the walkways. I swear I could have had this video wrapped up much quicker if I didn't spend so much time watching it at 8 times speed. It is entirely satisfying watching this. I could all day watch it. The little precinct I think is a decent addition. If nothing else, it keeps a bit of pedestrian action going on, but it does add a little bit of colour and a little bit of interest to the build. And that wraps it up for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Here's a couple more for you to check out. Cheers.